Welcome to the Christian Men at Work podcast, where I interview men from all walks of life with varying job titles who have one thing in common. They are all choosing daily to live out their Christian faith through their work, and because of that they are leading, prospering, glorifying God, and experiencing joy and purpose in their work, and you can too. Men at Work, welcome to episode 39. Today we're going to have an awesome conversation with Dr. Bill Brown about a Christian worldview. Dr. Brown led two Christian universities as president, Bryan College and Cedarville University. Currently, he divides his time among several initiatives. He's the Senior Fellow of Worldview and Culture at the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. He directs the Colson Fellows Program, an international fellowship program equipping professionals to engage their culture for Christ. He serves as the senior executive of World APP, an international technology firm with offices in Kiev, London, and Boston. He's written several books. Dr. Brown and his wife, Lynn, have been married since 1976. They have two children, April and Alex, and four grandchildren, and they live in Mars Hill, North Carolina. Let's get right to our interview. Hey, Bill. Thanks a lot for joining the discussion today. How are you?
I'm fine, Dave. How you doing?
Doing good. Well, I'm just going to jump right into this with my first question, which is, when and how did you become a Christian?
Well, I became a Christian my senior year of high school down in Florida. That's where we grew up, and I got invited to a youth gathering. I wasn't all that involved in church. I was a basketball player and did all kinds of things that probably I shouldn't have been doing, but it didn't bother me because I was 17, 18 years old. But I got invited to this youth program, and I went because I had free pizza. And so I went, and the fellow shared the gospel there, and it didn't strike me at the time that this was a life-changing message, and I'd heard it before, I'm sure. But I just remember recognizing at that moment that that's why Jesus Christ came. He came for me. He died for me. And I haven't gotten over that yet.
And that's a good thing.
Oh, that's an awesome thing, yes.
Yeah.
The pizza was good, too, so it was...
Yeah, it's funny because a friend of mine had the similar pizza story, that pizza is what drew him in, so...
Great evangelistic tool, pizza.
Exactly. Well, I have to say you're the first person I've interviewed who was a university president, so I do have a few questions I want to ask you specifically about universities. Sure. So my first question is, so you were a president over two universities for a long period of time, 20 years. What did you do? What did you do before that? I'm kind of curious as to what leads someone to become a university president.
University president is an odd job in many ways, but when I got through high school, I went into college and majored in mathematics. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a mission specialist. I love math and astronomy and those things, and so I focused on that. But as I said, I'd come to Christ just before I went to university, and as I went through university, I began to grow in Christ. And when I graduated, I thought, I think there are some things I would rather be doing than being an astronaut, and that is serving the Lord somehow. And so I spent several years working, and I got married and got active in some aspects of ministry at a church, and I said, this is, I think, what I want to do. So I went to seminary and spent my 7 years of tribulation getting my master's and PhD in biblical studies and so on, and realized I wanted to teach. So got a position at a small college in Tennessee where I taught Bible, theology, philosophy, and then developed a worldview program there. And as I say, this is Bryan College in East Tennessee. After I'd been there a number of years, about 9 years, I became the provost during that time and then became president and served there for 10 years. So my professional life has always been in higher education, and so I just was dragged kicking and screaming down the ladder from the lofty position of faculty to the position of president.
So what did you like most about being university president, you think?
Well, most, particularly the two schools I served at Bryan and at Cedarville, very student-focused. And in both colleges, we had chapel every day, and we made sure that chapel was an incredible experience. In fact, at Cedarville, it was about the highest-rated experience by the students. When you get 3,000-plus students together every day, and I loved that. I spoke every Monday. And the interaction with the students is just knowing that it's an opportunity to build into the lives of young people at the very crucial time in their life, and the trajectory of their lives really is being decided during that time. And that's what I remember most when I look back. We raised a lot of money. We had a lot of incredible programs, built a lot of buildings, but none of that compares to the excitement of the students and being able to be friends with them. I hear from alums just about every day, and that ongoing discipleship has been probably the best part of what I was able to do.
Well, universities are obviously really important in our society and a blessing. They certainly, I have benefited from my university education, and I want my kids to get degrees. But I guess I do want to just dig into this issue about when you talk about our worldview and our culture having changed so much over these last decades here in America. A lot of times you'll hear universities come up as kind of the place where the minds are being shaped, and maybe not always in a positive way when it comes to worldviews. So I guess I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this, but I'll just say, is that a fair criticism that higher education has had played a real role in the shift away from a Christian worldview towards maybe what you call a postmodern worldview?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Dave. And I think now we're postmodern, but that's a whole other interview. But the college campus is a perfect storm for a lot of things happening in a young person's life. As I said, it's a crucial time in the lives where they can decide on the trajectory of their life. And if they've been in a good Christian home, a good Christian church, or even a Christian school, and they go away to university, they begin to realize that they are being confronted with ideas, people, and so on that they've not really had to deal with at all. And unfortunately, most churches don't do much to help disciple young people and to prepare them for what they're going to be confronted with at university. And that lack of preparation many times causes them to question their faith. Even at a Christian university, they may struggle a little bit and say, is this my faith, or is this my parents' faith, or my youth group's faith, or what? And during that very, very, very difficult time, unless there are some people around to help them, to encourage them, to listen to them, to let them ask difficult questions and to process them and so on, many times they do one of two things in a negative way. They either, just drop their faith completely. And I know a number of students just now, as this semester's already begun, the new year, have done that from families that we know. They just completely walk away from the faith. I think they have. Or secondly, they become very schizophrenic, and that is they have their spiritual life over here, and then their academic life, their work life, their public life, their professional life over here, and they draw a deep, deep chasm in between the two. And that's devastating, I think, and that's what we see in a lot of adults now. They've been compartmentalized, those two areas of their life, and so the idea of becoming a vibrant witness for Jesus Christ is just no longer on the table because they've made that particular decision.
Well, on the flip side, I mean, I've had several conversations through doing these interviews of men who have actually come to salvation while they're at college. Oftentimes, I think I oftentimes hear it come up through like Campus Crusade for Christ. But in general, there's been a lot of people who have gone away from their faith. And I guess just to add another question on this would be, at one time our universities were Christian institutions, right? And now they're very, for the most part, secular, and with a and so I guess is it the fact that universities have changed so much? Are they unique in that, or is it just a broader part of the general shift in culture?
Well, two things. Your first comment about people coming to Christ, you'd ask about the negative impact, but a very, very positive impact, because there are some outstanding campus ministries. You mentioned Campus Crusade. There's Navigators. There's Campus Life. There's the Reformed University Fellowship, and others. Wesleyan Fellowship, Baptist Student Union programs, and so on. These can come alongside and provide a lot of what they were missing in the past and help them think through all the difficulties. And many of these ministries are just doing stellar jobs in helping young people through those years. So just thumbs up. And parental support for their church support. Many churches will send their kids away to college and not keep up with them, and so on. And it's a shame. There's so much that could be done, but it's not done. Because, as you say, the secularization of culture, as we have grown in that, where religion is something that is private, that you do on your own, which is silly. And C.S. Lewis writes a lot about that. And that you're not supposed to talk about spiritual things publicly, or at least in a positive way, because that could be offensive to people. And as a result, universities will often hire people and promote people who are definitely secular and in some ways counted against the professor who is openly Christian as well. And I found that even at the university. I attended the University of South Florida in Tampa area, and found that to be the case, very secular. However, some of the most growing Christians I encountered were in the science department, in the mathematics department, so on. I was just blessed to have known these men and women who had a real love for the Lord and were just top-notch scientists and thinkers and so on. And that was at that particular time very, very encouraging for me in my young faith.
What do you think is the outlook for Christian universities in general moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good question, David, because there used to be so many, and there still are, but it's difficult now, mainly because of the cost of higher education. I mean, it is just astronomical. When I went to the university, I was able to basically work hard and pay for it. Now, even at state universities, it's difficult. And for Christian universities who are almost exclusively private, the cost is just amazing. And that is not only seen in students not being able to get into the university because of the cost, but afterwards they have huge, huge debt that saddle them for literally decades afterwards. And which makes people question whether or not the college education is worth it. And that's probably the biggest thing. And I'm not sure what the answer is to that, unless you get some really wealthy donors or somehow, some way to be able to provide some help along the way. There are ways, for people to make it through a Christian college, and one is to get a lot of credits in high school that apply to your college degree, joint education programs, and so on, and a lot of online kinds of things that help you so that you can spend the better part of several years finishing up there. So you can, in some ways, you can cut your education bill in half by doing that. Getting a lot of your general education requirements out of the way, so they say, and so you have 2 years at the university rather than no years at the university, or 4 years with a $100,000 debt that you have to pay back. And I think that's probably what many people are trying to figure out how to work.
Yeah, and North Carolina, and I'm sure many other states too, they make it so that you can go to the community college for, very little cost, and then make the transfer. So that's an option as well.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I want to talk about worldview because that's been such a big part of your life and your ministry. You're the senior fellow of worldview and culture at the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. You direct the Colson Fellows Program and International Fellowship Program, equipping professionals to engage the culture for Christ. I'm obviously reading this. I think it's important just to get some context for why this is such a big part of what you do. So my question for you is, why is it important for Christians both to have a Christian worldview as well as to understand other worldviews?
Well, I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that we all have a worldview, or actually a worldview has us. It's part and parcel of being a human. It's how God made us. And as a result, we have a life that helps us to see what animals cannot see. And to think what animals just can't think. We're concerned about issues related to morals and the future of relationships, etc. We think about life, we think about death, we think about the future, and we think about why we are here. Is there some purpose? All of these things are part of what God has instilled within us, the way He made us. As we read in Ecclesiastes, that God has put eternity in our hearts. And that drives us nuts as we try to figure out the world around us. And the morality that God has given us, when we read in Romans chapter 2, every person, believer or not, has the law written on their hearts. And then, of course, being made in the image likeness of God gives us that sense of a spiritual nature as well as a moral nature, creative nature, all of those things combined. So that's who we are, that's how we're made, and it drives us to ask questions about why we are here and to make sense of life. And as a result of that, Dave, people who are creative, let's say they write a book, they sing a song, or whatever, whether they like it or not, they are communicating worldviews. And every song, every movie, every television show, every book, every commercial is telling us what the good life is, and what is good, what is bad, how we're supposed to live, how we decide what's right and wrong, and so on. It's all bound up in that. We cannot escape it. And so since we're getting those messages all the time, we need to be thinkers. In fact, the Apostle Paul tells the Thessalonians in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 21, he says, now test everything. And the idea is that he wants us to realize that there are messages all around us, and we need to be evaluating what those messages are actually saying. And one of the things I do when I teach worldview, particularly to high school and college students, is to have them look at movies and read the newspaper and books and look at commercials and so on, listen to songs. I want you to tell me what worldview is being communicated in these. And by golly, they can do it. They just never looked at it before. It's just a song. It's just a movie. It's just a television show, they say. And then when they start realizing that it is actually telling us how we're supposed to live, what's important in life, and so on, then it changes the way they start looking at things. And these messages that at one time influence us without us realizing it, now we can, in many ways, turn them back on themselves because we recognize what those messages actually are. And so I think it's crucial for us in today's culture, because our culture is collapsing so much, it's rebooting itself so quickly, that we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to understand what messages are coming to us and then be able to respond appropriately.
Well, I agree. It is so important. And I recently heard your talk about this topic, and I was hoping that you could give me kind of a quick summary of that discussion where you talk about the three main worldviews, because it was really helpful for me, and I think it would be for our listeners as well. So if you could just walk us through what are the three main worldviews, please.
Oh, sure, Dave. Just bear in mind that everybody has a different perspective on it. So you can say everybody has their own worldview, which is true. But if you look at worldviews as how we understand the world around us, then they fall into three major categories. That is, all worldviews are in one of three groups. And we'll look at them by how they answer ultimate questions. Like if you ask 4 questions, where did everything come from? Why am I here? How am I supposed to live? What's right and wrong? And then finally, what happens when we die? Or where is everything headed to the future? Those 4 questions, we'll call those ultimate questions. And you have to answer them. You can't just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter what happens when I die. Well, actually, it really does matter what happens when you die. And you're free to believe whatever you want. But since something actually happens, it would incumbent upon us to try to figure out what that is, to try to find out if there's any clue to what actually happens, or even the question of origins again. Where did everything come from? Is there God that created, or did things just appear from quantum fluctuation in the vacuum, as Richard Dawkins would say? So those questions, we're looking at more of an inductively. Here we are, we're asking these questions, and how we answer them fall into the 3 categories, and we'll call these the big categories of what worldviews are. And the first one would be an atheistic or naturalistic worldview. That is, there is no God. Everything just happened, and however the universe came about was certainly natural. There was nothing supernatural. Everything was physical. There was nothing metaphysical about what we saw, what we did. What happens when we die? Nothing. We worm food. We're dead. We're gone. How do we know what's right or wrong? Well, we just have to agree to get along. And why are we here? What's the meaning of it? There is none. We're just here. And you choose however you want to live. Just don't hurt anybody else. A second would be a second group of worldviews would be transcendentalism. That's the idea. When you think of transcendentalism, it would be like, let's say, the Eastern religions, of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, where everything is God. Not a personal God, but a very some sort of a cosmic spirit that everything is a part of. And I'm part of it. You're part of it. Everything that we see is part of it. And the idea being that ultimate reality is spiritual. It really never had a beginning. It will have no end. Our future is just a reincarnation again and again and again until we get out of this cycle of birth and rebirth. And the goal, of course, is harmony with everything, because we are one. And the third worldview is theism, and that is unlike the naturalist view where everything is physical and natural, and unlike the transcendental worldview where everything is just spiritual. The theistic worldview believes that there's a God who brought everything into existence. So here you have 2 entities, an eternal God and what he has actually created, which we call the universe, the heavens and the earth. And he created us for himself. God created us so that we could love him, but actually he created us so that he could love us first. And the future will either be an eternal life with him or apart from him. And our meaning is bound up in the creator, the artist of the whole thing in which we find ourselves, and that's God. So if you look at different religions, you can look at Islam or Judaism, Christianity, they're all theistic religions. All the Eastern religions would be transcendental. And a lot of the various religions and philosophies of atheism, agnosticism, scientism, etc., would be in the naturalism.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. There are several things that I really like about that. For one, it helped me in when I thought about conversations that I could have with different people, because if I know someone who fits into one of those 3, it kind of gives me a starting point to talk to them about it, as opposed to just telling them what I think is wrong about their view. Is just letting them know that I understand kind of what they believe and that it fits into this category. So that was really helpful for me. And the other thing that was really helpful was to recognize where things fit out in the entertainment world. Of course, with the transcendentalism, I'm thinking about Star Wars, and because because we see these different spiritual ideas out there in Hollywood movies, etc., and we know they're not right, but we're not quite sure how to define how they're not right. And when you talk about these worldviews, it gave me kind of a context to make sense out of these different ideas.
Right. That's good, and that's important, and that's one of the things that we need for our kids, is because they have no equipment to be able to discern the culture around them at all, and we need to be able to give them that and to mentor them through that, to disciple them through that, and for them to develop that discernment themselves. In fact, one of the things I did when I was in grad school, I was working with a youth group, and we had about 60 kids in the youth group, most of them first time in the church. We led them to Christ. And so we started this thing where on every Wednesday night, we would look at whatever music they were listening to. Now, you got to realize this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. Nobody was doing this. And so we were listening to their favorite music, writing out the lyrics, and talking about, what is this telling me to believe? What's it telling me to do? What to say is right and wrong, and so on. And that summer was just an incredible time for them, and they just grew so much. And I came across one of the girls who had been in the youth group. This is a number of years later. She was a young mother at the time, and she said to me, she grabbed my hand and she said, "You ruined my music listening." And I laughed. "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I can't listen to a song now without thinking, what is this song telling me to do? What's it telling me to believe? What's the worldview here? How does it line up with truth?" And then she said, "It's the best gift I ever received. It's discernment." And it stuck with her. Once you start doing that, you find yourself being able to, or at least wanting to discern all of the messages that come into your life on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's awesome. What have been some of the major trends in worldviews over the last 10 to 20 years?
A good question. I think technology has pretty much dominated everything, and it's brought so much into the lives of young people that we never dreamed that they would be having to deal with at such young ages, whether it be pornography, or whether it be violence, or whether it be interactions, communication with each other. Sexting is such a big thing. You've got preteen kids and then the young teenagers sitting here and naked pictures of themselves. I mean, they would never talk to each other personally because they're too shy, but they would send naked pictures of themselves to each other. And then the pornography, which is just so overwhelming for young kids. They just do not know how to deal with it, and it just radically alters their mind and the way they think about life, the way they think about marriage, the way they think about so much. And it's these kinds of moral challenges that just overwhelms young people when they start trying to think of things that are important in life, substantive issues. And that's probably been the biggest thing. And the idea that for example, the whole issues of sexuality, gender dysphoria, gender identity, and so on, again, I think follows on all of that communication through the technology that we have. And now it's almost as if people are looking around, young people are looking around and beginning to realize nothing really matters except myself. There's nothing outside of myself that matters, so I need to identify myself as I see fit. And so what happens is that people begin to identify themselves by their sexuality. I think Facebook at one point had 71 different ways of defining your gender. And they were criticized because they didn't have enough to include everybody. And for me, we're going, what? I thought there was male and female, and now we have all of these. And it's symptomatic of a culture that has really kind of turned loose on itself and then kind of caving in on itself as well. And I think that's been the biggest thing. And so there's a lack of real interest in big questions. And I think a key word would be apatheism, which is just a lack of interest in important issues in life, and just a focus on the individual.
Is that a big part of what we've called postmodernism, or because I wanted you to kind of share your thoughts on what postmodernism is and how it applies to what we're talking about?
hmm Yeah, postmodernism, of course, goes way back, and you don't hear about it a whole lot anymore. Postmodernism is a reaction against the modern world. Modern world is dominated by science and the scientific method, and science has the answer for everything, not just technology, but just science is going to uncover everything about ourselves biologically, everything about our universe astronomically, and so on, and we just have to wait around. Well, postmodern says science has been a great tool for knowledge, but it's also a great weapon. Look at how many people have died at the hands of nuclear weapons, or at the hands of the biological weapons, and so on. And the bottom line then is postmodernism. Now it's just us, and the focus on postmodernism is the individual, which is very similar to what I just described, but it's morphed a little bit because of the communication technology that we find through the internet. And of course, postmodern in the negative sense would say that everything is interpretation. There's no such thing as facts. Now, what does it mean to you? It's an extreme form of existentialism. And what does it mean to you? That's all that really matters. It doesn't matter what the author meant when he wrote this book, or even the Bible. All that really matters is what it means to you, because that's what you've got to live with. And there is no ultimate meaning, and even if there is, there's no way for us to apprehend it, to understand it. Therefore, you make things to mean whatever you want them to mean. And that kind of slides into the kind of world that we find now. And as I said, it has become so sexualized and so trite that it kind of defies even what the lofty goals that the postmodernists had when they began to speak and write.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't like to use fear language, but this whole apathyism that you talk about, it's so concerning because, earlier you mentioned, when talking about the worldviews, that you divide them based on these key questions that you ask about life, and you said, and you have to answer those questions, but the attitude you're describing basically says, I don't have to answer those questions. It's like I'm just like comfortably numb, right?
Yeah. Good Pink Floyd. But the idea being that I just don't care. I just don't care. And if there's anything that a parent or an adult just drives us nuts, and it gives us a heart such great sorrow, is you cannot make someone care. And there's nothing you can do to make someone care. And that's the bottom, I think, of despair, when you have a son or a daughter and they just don't care. You can't make somebody love, you can't make them care. And that hopelessness is just heartbreaking. And to have a whole generation on the verge of adopting that as their core value is frightening.
So how do we deal with that? I mean, you can talk about different ways you can debate someone who has a different worldview than you do, but how do you engage someone? How do you engage someone who has this attitude that all that really matters is what they think, that there is no absolute truth? How do you talk to that person?
Well, I think two things. One is just the realization that we are made in the image and likeness of God, and that there's that spark of God's creative presence, I think, in everybody's life. And so appealing to that time and time again, and I think is crucial. But also, as believers, we know that the Holy Spirit is at work. And I am one to testify again and again that we cannot do it in our own flesh. And I have seen God's Spirit change lives in a number of ways, either through great blessing or even great suffering in the lives of some of our friends. And what God has done is to reach into their souls, and they've responded, And but what it gets down to, Dave, though, is you and I have to live a life that honors the Lord. And I'm not talking about being a moral life, I'm just talking about a life of joy, a life of hope, and then reaching out to serve and to treat people with dignity and respect, and to care for them and to love them and to talk about Jesus Christ, and to, not make it a big deal, just to live your life and let your life, shine. And then what happens is people want to know, and you find the passages in Scripture like 1 Peter 3:15, where he says, let's live in such a way, sanctify Christ as Lord in your life, and always be ready to give an answer for the hope that is within you to everyone who asks. And then he goes on to talk about how we do it, however, with gentleness and respect. But notice it's in response to their question. So whatever we've done to live, to share, to sacrifice, to care, and it generates that spark of interest. What is it that you believe that makes you like this? And you share that. And there are so many testimonies of millennials who were just going along in life and just didn't give one care about anything. But it was a person. It was a person that they respected, that they knew, whether it was a friend or someone else, that gave them hope because of their life in Christ. And I think that's where we need to be faithful. Imagine millions and millions and millions of Christians doing that every day. And I think that's what God's going to use most.
I agree. And I think that's a great prescription for us as individuals. What about the church as a whole? And I hesitate a little bit to talk about the church as a whole, because the church is made up of individuals, of course, but what is the church doing well to engage our culture today, and how could it improve in how it's engaging culture?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, there are individual churches which are catching the vision of what it means to actually disciple, to help, and to equip people to understand the culture around them, to engage it, and to move ahead. And our church, for example, we do a 5-mile circle around with our church in the middle, and we are going to meet the needs of people in this circle, and children who don't have enough food to eat, single moms that really need help, and so on. And that's what we've been doing. And it is amazing the opportunities we have in service. How exciting it is to reach out to people. If you invite them to come to church, they're not coming to church, but you go and help them, and these people are coming to Christ by the huge numbers, just because we're doing what the Christians did in the first century, And so churches that are doing that, as well as teaching the Word of God well, and then teaching people not only to understand it, but to live it, to know the Word of God and to love the God of the Word. And I think churches that are doing that, they're making such a huge impact in ways that will only be measured, I'm not saying in heaven, but slowly but surely, I think churches are getting the point of what it means to say, this, I know what I'm saved from, but what am I saved for? And this is it.
All right, I got one final question before we finish up, and that is, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about what the Colson Fellows program is all about.
Yeah, the Colson Fellows program is it's a program for people around the world, actually, but we're focusing mainly in the United States, who want to spend 9 months reading the best books, interacting with the writers of these books on worldview, culture, cultural engagement, and so on. We focus on worldview, culture, and cultural engagement, as I said. We'll dive in deep on the LGBTQ issues, on racial reconciliation, on Islam as well. And right from your home, you read the books, and we have webinars that you join us live. And if you're in the national program, we have these 3 residencies. In fact, we have our first residency coming up this weekend in Colorado Springs. And we'll have speakers and so on. And it's an incredible program. And right now we have about 240 people going through the program right now. And these are everything from, we have Air Force generals going through, university presidents, we have homeschool moms, and retired folks, and other. I mean, it's just you pick a walk of life, and there are people in that walk of life that are going through this program because they feel like they want to serve the Lord more. They want to be able to serve the Lord more, but they know they need to know more, and they don't have time to go to grad school. But this program fits that need. And it is a very exciting program, and we're glad to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, if anyone wanted to learn more about that program or more about other ministries you're involved in, or just reach out to you and get or find out more about what you're doing, how would they go about doing that?
Email probably be the best, and why don't I just give you my Gmail? That's the easiest. And that's just William Brown, all one word, William Brown-23. That was my number in basketball. Okay, William Brown-23. And that's a gmail.com account, and I'd love to interact with anyone.
You and Michael, huh?
Yeah, exactly. He got it because I had it.
Of course. All right. Well, thanks for your time, and you have a great day.
Dave, God bless you. Thank you, too.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Men at Work, I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have. We just heard about Bill Brown's journey being Spirit-led at his work. Each of our journeys are unique, but hopefully you've heard something in this episode to inspire you and give direction for your own personal daily work life. You can find links and other information from this show at davehilgendorf.com. Until next time, have a great day and God bless.